Hello everyone, thank you for letting me present my portion of this panel via video. I will be moving on from prompts to talk about knowledge bases and how that encourages more structured approaches to how we deal with AI. Now you may have already heard that prompting is dead, that AI systems are so good now that you actually don't really need to think about your prompts anymore. Or is it? Would be the question I might ask when you think about it in certain ways. So my background is that I have actually been exploring AI since 2020 and spent a lot of time actually with prompting in the early days, and I still do a lot with prompting, specifically about how to structure prompts for teams and for developing content at scale and doing AI agents and things like that, where you're actually using the prompt over and over again. But as the AI systems have gotten more sophisticated, including being able to upload content, for example, or search the web, those kind of things, you're able to provide more context. And the more context you provide, the less prompting you need to do. So if I actually upload the right information in the right way to Claude Projects, for example, I hardly have to write prompts at all because that knowledge becomes the prompt itself. So really, it's the next phase in understanding how we not just interact with AI, but how we build AI systems in accurate and ethical ways. But it still relies on the same structured principles that made structured prompts work. And that's really goes back to technical writing and thinking in more structured terms. So for example, adopting a modular mindset. So breaking your prompts into sections so that you can more easily see the organization and also be able to edit and change it as things grow. Using semantic tags to tag what each block does. Mapping the connections between the different prompts and prompt blocks as you're managing them as a business or as a team. And ultimately designing for reuse so that you can reuse these prompts or even reuse parts of prompts. And this would require then having some sort of centralized management like a prompt library. And that's a lot of what I've been working with on my Substack, Cyborgs Writing. So really, it's about turning something like this into this, which essentially creates the same results. And I'm not going to go much further into prompting because we already had a presentation on that. And I have a lot of stuff on Cyborgs Writing. But you can then turn this into this. So one of the things that you can do with prompts is add context or content. And that's what these little 3 hashtags mean, is that that's the end of the prompt. Now here's content for you to work on. And that's what we might add to that prompt beforehand. And structuring it in this way actually increases the speed of the AI. I've done a few tests recently from 1 millisecond to 5 milliseconds, for example, which may not seem like a lot, but of course, when you're working with content at scale, that can matter a lot. So I really think this form of prompting is still pretty relevant, even though the average person, I don't think probably needs to think about structured prompting as much. But when you're working with a team and you're trying to create more consistency with your output, or when you're working with a chatbot where you're trying to control more what that chatbot is doing, or even with agent workflows, basically those are created with prompts. If you want to control what your agent is doing automatically, then you better have really good instructions for it. But really what we're seeing in the field of technical writing is we're moving from prompt engineering to context engineering, which certainly includes prompts, but goes beyond that into structuring and organizing and enriching the source content that the AI works with. And this really has a lot to do with RAG, which has changed a lot with how we can use AI, mostly because instead of using AI as default training, we can now use our own content. And for those of you who don't know, here's a technical definition, but basically what it means is that this is a tool that AI can use to go out and find information either on the web or in your own knowledge base, pull out what's most relevant, and connect it to your prompt. And it looks a lot like this. You have your user query. It searches through all the chunks of content that you give it, pulls out what it thinks is the most relevant, puts that into the prompt, and then gets a response. So really you can start thinking about the content that you give AI or the content that AI works over as just one big prompt. And so if small prompts work better when they're structured and reusable and all those things, then content as a big prompt will also work better, but of course it requires a lot more work and strategy. So it's important to understand how content is prepared for AI. It is actually brought into into a knowledge base. It's chunked for the AI and then into different chunks, usually randomly, and then it's vectorized or embedded or it turned into a numerical vector and stored in that database. And so really what the AI sees is not your documents, it sees a bunch of chunks that it created. And this is really important to understand when we think about how we're providing content to AI. There is the dump and pray method where you just dump all your stuff in there and just hope that AI finds the most relevant stuff. Then there's the structured approach where you build things piece by piece and put it in and make it easier for AI to find it. And really the problem often happens is where if a chunk splits a unit of meaning up, then it makes it harder for the AI sometimes to put two and two together or to understand the different relationships. So recently I've dug into some research that really has revealed a lot about how AI works with these chunks and how being more structured can help us. So if AI uses 40 to 70% of the available context window, it works the best. Whereas if you fill up that context window, then it doesn't work as well, which means like you have a limited number of chunks or size chunks to put in there. Also, AI RAG systems function much better when things are chunked by the structure elements. So by headings, for example, which means that your data should have some headings, right? And also there's no perfect token length. This is just like the amount of words or characters that are in a chunk. Some computer engineers try to find that perfect chunk, but what they realize is, for example, smaller chunks work better with facts, and bigger chunks work better with things that need more complex answers like instructions. And really this validates a lot of what's been happening in the tech writing world since the 1990s, probably before, in thinking about how do we structure content, and specifically using micro content as the solution. So understanding content as made up of self-contained information units that have clear semantic boundaries and explicit relationships. And this goes to structured authoring, where you can create these little micro contents and then put them together in different ways. Kind of like DITA, if you know what that is. And of course, this comes from Robert Horn, who actually started thinking about how these different bits of micro content actually associate with ways of thinking, which helped us organize certain topic approaches to technical writing like DITA. And now what we're finding is that also works with AI now. And these are some examples of information types that are used a lot in technical writing that you can use then to organize your micro content or your knowledge base. So for example, conceptual would be a piece of a chunked content that would just explain what or why something is happening. Or a task would just have the how-tos. Reference would be something that you need to look up, etc., etc. So one way I'd like to illustrate this to you is by looking at a study abroad advisor tool that I've been working on, where I give it some of the notes that I have done about my study abroad, and then that AI can function on top of that and provide outputs that are specific to my context. So here's part of my structured notes. In this case, it's in a database that is functioned around objects. So you think about all your knowledge as specific kind of object. In this case, places. So knowledge about study abroad, there's different aspects of that knowledge. Places is definitely one of those. And this is the collection of my places. And this is my case, and I've recently ran a few tests about this to see if structured content works better. So here's unstructured, just a bunch of notes that I made about Krakos Mound. Well, then I thought, oh, well, actually, I could break this up into different information types. This part's reference, this part's concept, this part's process. And then expanding with Q&A, and then I actually started thinking about, okay, what kind of questions would I ask or a study abroad leader ask about this entry? And how can I add it into this document in a structured way? And so I created this recreated this entire document around structured perspectives of that Q&A. So I can kind of match the questions to these different parts of the micro content. What I found that we actually do get different results. So when I ask what physical requirements are required for visiting Krakos Mound, in the unstructured, it comes up with uneven ground with layers of earth, which actually comes from the Wikipedia or something like that, and is an archaeological description, not a study abroad description of the site. And then with the information typed, it gets a little bit better, but it's kind of vague, moderate uphill climb. And finally, the third one, I give I get very specific results about what kind of walk it is and what people need. So you can see that the quality of the content that you're giving the AI is going to influence the output. And you can actually start creating then tailored checklists, for example, that are specific to my study abroad, or a tailored message letting them know, hey, we're going to go see Krakos Mound tomorrow. Here are things that you need to know. I don't need to put all that stuff in the prompt because it's already there in the knowledge. So really, I think what we're seeing here is a shift in how we think about rhetoric, especially in an AI world. So I think the future does still belong to people who think rhetorically. And we can think of this in terms of machine rhetorics. Before we organize information for human consumption, now we architect that meaning for human-machine collaboration. And I think soon, and some people are already doing this, we'll be designing entire semantic systems that shapes how AI understands and explains our world, which ultimately is a rhetorical act. All right, thank you for your time. And of course, I'm interested in any questions you have. And if you're interested in digging deeper, you can take a look at my Substack, my course, or follow